It started with a shove. Not just any shove, but the kind that makes an entire arena hold its breath. 1 second, Caitlin Clark was standing tall, locked in the rhythm of the game. The next, she was flat on the hardwood, staring up at the lights, the sound of gasps and low groans echoing from the stands. And the person standing over her? None other than Marina Mabrey. Hours later, Mabrey would break her silence, finally speaking out about what happened. But here's the thing, she didn't choose just any moment to do it. She waited until the air was thick with rumors, until headlines swirled about investigations, unfair treatment, and bias in the WNBA. That timing wasn't just suspicious, it was calculated. This wasn't just about a single hit in a basketball game. This was about pride, power, and the politics of the league. And what happened next didn't just change the energy in the arena, it flipped the entire game on its head. The 17th of June. The Fever are trailing, tension already creeping into every possession. Caitlin Clark has taken her share of hits before, but this time, the sequence was brutal. First came an elbow, then an eye poke, and before the crowd could even process that, Marina Mabrey came storming in, dropping her shoulder and driving Clark straight to the floor. The crowd didn't erupt in cheers. They didn't even boo. Instead, the air filled with that unmistakable, sharp intake of breath, thousands of people watching in stunned disbelief. This wasn't a tangle for the ball. This wasn't accidental contact. This was deliberate. And yet, the referees didn't eject Mabrey. No flagrant 2. No walk to the locker room. Just a technical foul like it was nothing more than a bit of trash talk gone too far. Hours later, behind the safety of post-game reviews and press statements, the league quietly changed its tune. That just a technical was suddenly upgraded to a flagrant 2, an automatic ejection if they'd called it in real time. But by then, the damage was done. The hit had been delivered, the tone had been set, and Clark had played the rest of the game knowing the player who put her on the floor was still right there on the court. Fans couldn't help but wonder, was the league reacting to the footage or to the outrage? To really understand why this shove hit differently, you have to rewind a few minutes. Because the moment Marina Mabrey charged in wasn't born out of nowhere, it was the climax of a slow boil the referees had failed to control. It began with a scramble for the ball. Clark was exactly where you'd expect her to be, battling for possession. Eyes locked on the play when J.C. Sheldon's hand swept across her face. Fingers caught her right in the eye. Not a glancing brush, not a harmless tap and eye poke that made the crowd gasp before the whistle even blew. And yet, the whistle didn't blow. Not right away. The game rolled on, the officials letting play continue as if nothing had happened. In that split second, an unspoken message passed through the floor. You can get away with more tonight. Clark, for her part, stayed composed. No flopping, no dramatics, just a steady blink, a shake of the head, and that locked-in stare she's known for. She trusted the refs to handle it. The problem was, they didn't, at least, not in time. By the moment they upgraded Sheldon's foul to a flagrant one, the momentum had already shifted. You could see it in the players' body language. Possessions had more bite. Contact carried more intent. Everyone was waiting for the next collision, because it wasn't a question of if, it was a question of when. When that next collision finally came, it wasn't a loose ball scramble or an accidental bump in the lane. It was Marina Mabrey charging in like she'd been waiting for this exact moment. The sequence plays out in seconds. After the eye poke incident, Clark gives Sheldon a quick shove, more of a frustrated back off than anything with real force. Sheldon barely budges. She's upright, steady, in no danger of hitting the floor. Then, from the edge of the frame, Mabrey appears. Not to separate them, not to talk her teammate down, but to set her feet, lean in, and drive her entire body into Clark's chest. The impact sends Clark sprawling sideways, legs folding beneath her, hitting the hardwood hard. Slow-motion replays strip away any doubt. This wasn't incidental contact in the chaos of a live play. The ball wasn't even in motion. This was during a dead ball moment when cooler heads are supposed to prevail, and the contrast was striking. Clark's shove barely moved Sheldon an inch. Mabrey's counter? It flattened Clark. That difference in force is exactly why so many fans called it dirty, not protective, not proportional. Even after the hit, Mabrey didn't just walk away. Chin up, chest forward. She looked directly at Clark as if making sure the message had landed. That look told the story the stat sheet couldn't. The shove should have been the peak of the chaos. Instead, it was just the beginning. When the refs chose not to eject Mabrey, the message was crystal clear to everyone on the court. You can hit hard tonight and stay in the game. And in professional sports, That's like leaving the lid off a boiling pot. It's only a matter of time before it spills over. From that point on, every possession carried a different kind of energy. Screens got harder. Box outs turned into full-body collisions. Even glances between players seemed sharper, edged with tension. The Fever, knowing their star had just been dropped with no real consequence for the opponent, started watching the officials as much as the scoreboard. It wasn't paranoia, it was survival. In sports, when you realize the refs aren't protecting you, you start protecting each other. And that's when Sophie Cunningham made her move. In the fourth quarter, she wrapped J.C. Sheldon up on a layup attempt, a deliberate, hard foul meant to send a message. The arena erupted. Players crowded in, voices rising, bodies jostling. What started as one dirty shove had become a chain reaction, and the officials were no longer steering the game, they were chasing it. By the final minutes, flagrant fouls and technicals were piling up like debris after a storm. The basketball almost felt secondary to the physical grudge match unfolding on live television. 2 days after the shove that shook the WNBA, Marina Mabrey finally spoke. But instead of cooling the fire, her words poured gasoline on it. Her defense was simple. She was protecting her teammate. She admitted she probably overreacted a little, but insisted there was no malice, no intent to hurt Caitlin Clark. In her mind, it was loyalty, plain and simple. But when you line those words up next to the slow-motion footage, the gap between story and reality is hard to ignore. Protecting a teammate usually means stepping in, separating players, or diffusing the moment. What Mabrey did was lower her shoulder, plant her feet, and drive an opposing player to the floor long after the whistle had gone silent. That's not intervention, that's escalation. Then came the line that set social media ablaze. Damned if I do, damned if I don't. It was the kind of statement that frames you as a victim of circumstance, not the aggressor. But for many fans, it landed flat. The replays didn't show someone trapped in an impossible situation, they showed someone making a conscious decision to hit, and hit hard. The more Mabrey talked, the more the narrative shifted from why she did it to why she was speaking now. Because her timing wasn't random, it came just as the league's handling of Caitlin Clark was becoming a national talking point. Whether by design or coincidence, her comments were now part of a much bigger conversation. On paper, this was just one foul in one game. But in the eyes of fans and increasingly in the national conversation, it was something much bigger. Because Caitlin Clark's rough night against the Sun wasn't an isolated incident. All season, she'd been taking borderline hits, elbows to the ribs, shoves in transition, hard screens that looked more like body checks. And more often than not, the whistles came late if they came at all. For her supporters, this wasn't just about Marina Mabrey's shove. It was about a pattern. A growing sense that the league's brightest young star wasn't getting the same protection as others, despite drawing record attendance and boosting television ratings. And when you're the face of a franchise, those hits don't just hurt physically. They raise questions about whether leadership values your safety as much as your marketability. The parallels weren't lost on commentators. They compared it to workplace hostile environment cases in other industries, where repeated rough treatment, if ignored, becomes a liability. Was this just competitive basketball? Or was Clark being targeted in a way that, if left unchecked, could damage both her career and the league's image? Mainstream voices like Stephen A. Smith began weighing in, and talk of investigations started swirling, not necessarily because one was underway, but because public pressure was building. Once the conversation shifts from a single moment to a cultural problem, it's not just the players on the court who have to answer, it's the league itself. By the time the final buzzer sounded, the box score was almost irrelevant. The real story had played out in the tension between the players, the decisions of the officials, and the league's quiet rewrite of the record. Because while Mabrey's hit was upgraded to a flagrant 2 the next day, that change didn't erase the fact that she finished the game on the court. It didn't prevent the escalation that followed. And it didn't give Clark back the protection she should have had in the moment. For some, that upgrade felt like justice. For others, it was hollow, a token correction made only after the cameras, the crowd, and the commentators turned up the heat. If the league will only act when the outrage is loud enough, what happens when the spotlight isn't there? And that's the question hanging over the WNBA as 2025 looms. Will Caitlin Clark's treatment on the court change, or will nights like the 17th of June become the norm? One thing is certain, the shove that sent Clark to the floor has outlived the final score. It's become a symbol, a test of whether the league will protect its stars when it matters most, or just rewrite the story after the damage is done. So, was Marina Mabrey defending her teammate or making a statement? And if this was her statement, what message did the league send in return?